So it seems like just yesterday, the entire internet was up in arms and angry at Nintendo with the price point of the Nintendo Switch 2 hardware, which many people thought would come in at $399. We of course learned that $449 would be the cost for the base console, but then especially around the $79.99 retail price point for Mario Kart World, their big launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2. And while I am not happy about that price increase, I also know the hundreds of hours of gameplay that I will get out of Mario Kart World. It is worth it to me on paper for how much time I'm going to spend in that game, but I understand the discourse and people being upset online at that price increase. Well, we now have a question on the table, which is, did the Switch 2 just become a better value in the current gaming environment we find ourselves in 2025? And that may be an astounding yes, because a big partner and at the same time competitor to Nintendo, Microsoft and team over at Xbox have announced officially an across the board price increase. We are talking every series consoles, S, X, and the all digital Series X, in addition to their first party games also seeing an increase in price point. And I want to have a broad conversation with what the landscape's going to look like, considering we are talking about consoles getting more expensive mid-generation, not less expensive. Also have a check-in conversation on that with the Switch 2, because Nintendo, you might remember in their own wording, did say that they cannot rule out a price increase depending on what happens with the tariff situation, and discuss Microsoft's business strategy from here and their spot in the gaming landscape as a whole, because they are already struggling to sell consoles. Now they have this price increase, and we have some interesting reports suggesting that they're top publishers on other platforms, not their own. And we have some exact comments from Phil Spencer about how he plans to handle supporting Nintendo Switch 2. So there's a ton of info to unpack in this video. Before we get on the same page with all of that, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here, and doing so will indeed enter you into a Nintendo Switch 2 giveaway that we will be revealing the winner after we cross the 90,000 subscriber mark on the channel. So with that, I want to first kick off this conversation right over at The Verge, where they have the exact breakdown of what Microsoft just announced, where it says Microsoft is raising prices on Xbox consoles, controllers, and games worldwide. Microsoft is raising prices of the Xbox Series S and X consoles, controllers, and even some new Xbox games around the world. Starting today, Microsoft says it has adjusted its recommended retailer pricing for its Xbox consoles and controllers, with Xbox Series X being bumped by $100 to $599.99. Microsoft is also planning to adjust the price of some of its first-party Xbox games this holiday season up to $79.99. Microsoft's Xbox Series S 512GB model is moving from $299 to $379, a price hike of $80. The Xbox Series 1TB model is moving to $429, and the Xbox Series X Digital Edition will now be priced at $549, with the 2TB Galaxy Black Special Edition model an eye-watering $729. It's more than the PS5 Pro, guys. Think about that. Xbox wireless controllers and headsets are also having their recommended retail price adjusted in the US, with the base controller moving to $64.99 and the Xbox wireless headset now at $119.99. You can already find both of these accessories at this type of pricing right now. Okay, so some new Xbox games are moving from $69.99 to $79.99 this holiday, in a move that matches the more expensive pricing of Nintendo's top Switch 2 launch title. And they say titles, there's only one game that's been revealed at $79, but you better bet Mario and Zelda probably also coming in at that price point. Xbox Game Pass pricing will remain the same though, and that's for now because subscription services are known to go up. But let's talk about just as a whole how this affects Microsoft and their position within the market. We already know that they're having a hard time actually really even competing directly against PlayStation in terms of console sales, and even Nintendo for that fact. Like, they have definitely fallen off as far as their actual base console sales go. Phil Spencer even kind of just chucking it up to basically losing the wrong generation with the Xbox One when gamers were building out their digital libraries in podcasts and things like that. He's just kind of straight up more or less said that, yeah, we are in a position now where we're not going to be the market leader on hardware, but we're going to try to put our games on as many different devices as possible. And we are definitely seeing them shift to that, as you can also see headlines like this over at VGC, where it says Microsoft was the top publisher on PlayStation Store by pre-orders in Q1 2025. Gaming revenue is up for Microsoft year on year, but hardware revenue is down. So hardware revenue is down. gaming revenues up, but that's coming from the competition. People are actually getting games like Indiana Jones, The Great Circle, Doom, The Dark Ages, Oblivion Remastered, and all of like the in-house Xbox Studio games. They're going to PlayStation 5 in truckloads of pre-orders. So this is something that we know. Of course, they will support Nintendo Switch 2 with many of these games as well. And we'll get into some of Phil Spencer's comments directly on the Switch 2 in a moment. But they're in a very interesting position to be pushing through a price increase on their consoles and games, because while the games portion does sound like that would be something they would do, they're already struggling to sell hardware, and now it's going to be that much harder to sell that same hardware that already is not selling very well. But then you do have that second thought at $80 games. Of course, you could argue that for Microsoft that does enhance the value of Game Pass for now, provided there's not a big price increase coming around the corner. But we also have gaming rental services being back in headlines, where Wario64 actually is talking about GameFly subscription prices have increased for new and returning accounts starting today. And obviously GameFly knows that services like what they offer, where you can rent and return physical video games, actually looks a lot more attractive now. So they are talking about the 1-disc plan going to $19.95 a month plus tax, and the 2-disc plan going to $27 a month. And you have some higher ones besides that, but game rentals is being brought up in the conversation because of the landscape of gaming right now, and rightfully so, because at that $80 price point, by the time you throw taxes on there, you are almost talking about a $100 purchase for one piece of software, and that's not really a great space for anybody in terms of impulse buys, when many things are in flux right now in terms of their price point and just the cost of living rising year over year. But while I do think the game price increase will definitely help the value proposition of a service like Game Pass, I also don't think that many people are going to go pick up a Series X at that $600 price point that it is now, and even the Series S getting priced up to $380. I think this is going to more quickly turn Microsoft into a mainly third-party focused company. And while it was interesting that the Switch 2 came out at that $450 price point, and we were talking about it being similar in price to the PS5 and the Series X, we now have a gap with the Series X, and you also have these price increases hitting PlayStation, but just not in the US as of yet. But PS5 price has risen in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, and this is a recent post, April 13th, in fact, so just last month, that they did announce that their editions of the PS5 console would be going up in those regions. So does Sony follow Microsoft and also do that here in the States? And I think that's a valid conversation that could happen, and you have to then look at Nintendo's value proposition, because they are actually launching their next generation at a $450 price point, and their next gen certain first party games, not Donkey Kong Bonanza, that's $69.99, but we're gonna have them hit $79.99. And if that is the norm in the industry, because it seems like it's gonna happen potentially mid-generation this time, as opposed to waiting for the start of the next gen consoles and just wait for whatever we find out that the GTA 6 game price is, because I think that's gonna be some sticker shock for people as well. Well, at that point, it does quite honestly change where Nintendo sits with their price point in the market, and they may have been privy to some of these increases being around the corner for their competitors. And while 450 and 80 sounded high to us, it was just something that was naturally going to take place in the gaming landscape very soon. And now this could be partly tied to tariffs, and we don't know if Nintendo will also adjust the price of their console due to tariffs, because they're on a 90-day pause right now that ends in July at some point, and there's really no concrete information of what the percentages are going to look like from a global perspective. And I'm not an economist, so wrong channel for that kind of stuff in terms of the deep dive. But nonetheless, if Nintendo can maintain that $450 price point, which they said they will during the launch window of the Nintendo Switch 2, and if they can keep it past that just for the life cycle of it, that $450 price point for a gaming console does not look like near as much of a sticker shock situation as it did when we first learned about it. And then you can turn around and just play the Microsoft games that are going to be $80 or whatever the case on Nintendo Switch 2 as well, because I then want to highlight some comments from Phil Spencer, which further backs up just how big of a shift this is in the entire gaming industry. Microsoft wants to support Switch 2 and is a big believer in Nintendo, says Nintendo's platform doesn't make Xbox antsy, the best of gaming friends. friends. And you have Microsoft Gaming CEO Phil Spencer has been a big proponent of Nintendo over the years. Ever since Nintendo and Microsoft started working together, Spencer has been incredibly kind towards the Big N. That support and admiration continues even as the Switch 2 nears release. In an interview with Variety, Spencer was asked about Microsoft plans to support Switch 2 with software. While Spencer was unwilling to share specific details, he made it clear that the company has a desire to bring games over to Switch 2. We've been supporting Switch 1. I want to support Switch 2. Nintendo has been a great partner. We think it is a unique way for us to reach players who aren't PC players, who aren't playing on Xbox. It lets us continue to grow our community of people who care about the franchises that we have, and that's really important for us to make sure we continue to invest in our games. I'm a really big believer in what Nintendo means for this industry and us continuing to support them. And getting support from them for our franchises, I think, is an important part of our future. So the writing is on the wall for Xbox. We've known about this for a long time, but I definitely think that with the mix of these price increases now, you're going to see gaming rental services surge. You're going to see Xbox Series sales continue to decline probably quicker than what they were doing before in terms of their console numbers. I think that those numbers will continue to just fall off. We do know Microsoft is kind of going to launch some kind of new technological leap generation, they're calling it, the biggest technological leap that's happened in console gaming. It seems to me like they may be talking about something to deal with AI and cloud technology, but we really don't know what they have cooking for next gen. But I think it's going to be a box you can go through to get from Microsoft, but also not just the place to play those games. And they're going to continue to market Game Pass to PC and on their platform, and they're going to give us probably a lot of $70 and $80 games on PlayStation 5 and Nintendo Switch 2 from the sounds of things. But let me know in the comments down below what you make of all of this. Do you feel like the gaming landscape where it sits now post this Microsoft announcement, that Nintendo is more in line and a better value than it once was on its own, kind of pushing the envelope to $80 games and also doing the $450 retail price point for the console? How do you feel about that price point amongst price increases being announced for competitor platforms mid-generation? And what, if any, Xbox games from a first-party perspective would you like to see at or around the launch window for Nintendo Switch 2? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.